Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so about 30 minutes away from tip off, which means this video is probably going to be a post game video rather than a pre game video. By the time it uploads, you ain't gonna have time to watch it. I'm not even gonna watch it. But this is one of those situations where I just wanted to give a few thoughts. So ahead of the game, I really hope to see our bench play better, man. I know we're on the road, so we can't expect certain guys to really, play better than they would at home. But I think that's safe to say that guys should have a fire lit under him, given the type of conversations that are going on about our team right now. As we mentioned earlier today in the pregame video, we declined our option on Jalen Hood-Schifino, and that should be something that makes people think, the whole team, not just the guys who are young, but everybody. The Lakers are ready to make quick changes if at all possible. And I think at the end of the day, that's what is needed. Not so good news on Vanderbilt. He hasn't had any setbacks, they say, but there is still some discomfort in the area of the foot. Trying to ramp it up, so he's not listed as day-to-day at this moment, and we are still allowing him to heal. It's not good news in the sense that we need him, but it is good news in the sense that we're not making the same mistake twice. I do think that the Lakers should wait however long it takes for him to be 100%. And I say that with most injuries, if not all injuries. But with this player who we had a setback with last year on his foot, came back for 5 games and then got hurt and ain't seen him since, we really need to let him heal. If that means not bringing him back till mid-December or early January, then that's what you do. And nobody wants to hear that. I don't like that scenario, but I think it's probably the safest bet for a player that we have on multi-year contract who's proving himself to really have problems coming back from this injury. So I don't think he should come back right now. I think the Lakers should be shopping him and try to trade him too. I really believe that is something we should do, and we talked a lot about that. But if we can move him on and maybe attach some players that we also would like to move on from to get rid of him, I think that might be a way for us to improve our team. I really believe that, man. Vanderbilt, Cam Reddish, maybe now that we declined Jalen Hood-Schifino, of course you would add him to the situation. Gabe Vincent, I want all them guys the hell off my team. I'm not here to be nice, man, because my bench sucks too bad, honestly. And my starters have too much to provide. We saw that in the first 3 games. I was listening to Jovan Buha, and he was trying to essentially tell us, hey, we're in a space where we're dealing with recency bias. And I think there's a balance between having recency bias and trying to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. And I've yet to find a way to do that, but I think that's what you aim for. I had this concept in my head where when you're assessing things, you zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. You want to give yourself a full look at both the short term and the long term. But when looking at the long term, you don't want to neglect the short term, because at the end of the day, what you're looking at is data in real time. And sometimes trends start a certain point, you start to see a full cycle, and this cycle repeats itself, and a lot of times those cycles last. And when you're talking about assessing basketball players specifically, the one thing you don't want to mistake in doing is allowing the cycle to continue for too long in the wrong direction. Because what you end up finding out is that affects your negotiation leverage when it's time to trade the player. In other words, if we're looking to move Max Christie because he's not playing well, Jovan was essentially saying that he thinks we should probably wait until maybe January to do so. If he continues to play this bad all the way throughout that process, then his value decreases the longer we wait within it. What you can sell people on now, if you were to choose to move Max, for example, is the fact that he's going to snap out of this right away. So you can take him right away. If they get a chance to look at him go through this for 7 weeks, that's a harder sell. So, there's 2 things to consider. Now, if you don't want to move Max, which, to be honest with you, I really don't want to move Max right now. I don't have any interest in giving up on Max Christie. But it's just by example to say that a player is playing poorly, he may be an attractive piece, but you don't want to wait until he's unattractive to try to move him. When you have somebody that wants this kid, and they're looking at him struggle, and they're considering buying low, but they're willing to give you what you want, it may not be wise to say, okay, well, just sit there for about 6 weeks and let's see how this plays out. Because if he starts to play better, you're in good shape, because then you can sell him for more. But then again, if he also starts to play better, you're less likely to want to move him any damn way. You see what I'm saying? So that's not going to help you with what it is you're going to get in your return, because you're going to start having cold feet potentially the better the player starts to play. And if he plays poorly for that duration of that time, then they're less likely to want to make a move for him at all, or might take some of that stuff off the table that they're willing to give you now, based on the fact that the upside of the player in the short term doesn't look as positive, and they may want to use him now. Now, if they're looking to take on a project and don't expect for him to play very well this year, that still stands in the same space, because they have to be able to project that this player is going to get better. If they see him in a cycle that lasts too long and him playing poorly, they're going to have less desire to see him as an investment even in the long term, depending on how they view that. And so that's why you don't want to wait too long, and you don't want to give up too soon. You want to zoom out, you want to zoom in, you want to zoom out, you want to zoom in, and give yourself a full bit of the information and take it both very seriously. So a lot of times people who don't, it's sort of like the optimistic folks. They don't want to give too much credence to the pessimism, because sometimes the pessimism tells the truth, and vice versa. Pessimistic people, they don't want to look at things too very optimistic a lot of times, but sometimes the optimism is probably the better way to play it. Both of their perspectives hold great merit, and you don't want to lean into one or the other too much, depending on what it is you're assessing. So that's my point of view when it comes to this basketball team. I think that, I heard the Lakers were saying that essentially they want to wait until January, try to assess what we have right now, because that gives them a good enough sample size. And that makes sense if you're hoping for the betterment of guys. If you're expecting guys to be better, then yeah, we could wait. Let's wait. Let's see what they're going to become. If we expect they're going to get worse or stay bad, waiting that process out it's not in your best interest. So that's, I would tell Rob Pelinka, it's a risk either way. When you take on too short of a sample size, you can move on too early. If you hold on to too long of a sample size, you can ruin your leverage if it stays worse. So it's a gamble either way. Hopefully smarter minds can make a good decision in that situation. But I know there needs to be a balance as it pertains to what you're looking at and how long you want to stare at it. That's what I believe. From what I understand, there's some type of report going around that the Lakers offered D'Angelo Russell and 2 first-rounders of some variation. I don't know how many protections or whatever that would be for Walker Kessler, and the Utah Jazz allegedly turned it down. I have a hard time believing that. I don't necessarily believe that that's how that went. I think they probably went back and forth on negotiations in trying to make this happen over the last several months, and maybe that was one of the things they brainstormed. D'Angelo Russell picks for Walker, but I don't actually think either team really wanted to pull the trigger on that anyway. I don't think the Lakers want to move picks for Walker Kessler, not first rounders. I hope they don't. He's not worth that. He's playing well, but he's not worth that. But if you add more to the trade package, then you can soup up the trade to making it worth it. And that's really what it comes down to. Yes, Walker Kessler is not worth 2 first-round picks. But if you start throwing in all different types of other stuff, Filipowski, who else? The other dude they just drafted in the back of the first round, Collier, Keontae George. You could soup it up if you want to make it worth a first-round pick. Them giving us back our pick for next year. It's a lot of things that can make it worth it to us to send out 2 first-round picks and D'Angelo Russell and bring it back Walker Kessler. So as long as we keep that in mind, we don't strangle ourselves to an opinion that would make it so that we're walking away from the table if for some reason we can get a deal that we like. Because in a nutshell, Walker Kessler, in my opinion, is not worth 2 picks, first-rounders. But if you're going to give me a bunch of other stuff, of course you can value it up to make it worth 2 picks to me. Now, I don't want to relinquish 2 picks, but I also know Utah has my pick for not next year. That's actually Atlanta has that, but they have another pick that comes soon. Maybe I can get back one of my own picks. Maybe I can get back something valuable that makes it make sense for me to move on from the picks that I have. I don't know how that looks. You know what I mean? They can offer me marketing. I don't know what they're going to offer. You know what I'm saying? But in order to get rid of the 2 picks, you're going to have to up that ante to the level from which 2 picks is valued to me, is what I would tell them. Bring in a 3rd team and give me something I really want. You know, that kind of thing. That's the only way you're going to get 2 picks out of me and involving Walker Kessler. Walker's not worth that. He's worth that to Utah, but not to the market. No. So, that and again, the Lakers need multiple bodies, man. We can't. And as much as I would love to be able to send out Gabe Vincent and say D'Angelo Russell and maybe Cam Reddish and bring back a player that's valued that much, we still need the bodies. You feel me? We need the bodies. And so that's when it becomes a bit of a frustrating thing to where the only way bringing one in, sending out 3 makes any sense is if that one is such a dynamic player that he can carry on 3 and 4 people worth of production. You know what I mean? You bring me Giannis, yeah, we talk about it. But that's not a real thing, so it's going to be very difficult to see that being possible, or rather responsible, in my opinion. So, I think the Lakers should still kick the can on Walker Kessler. I don't want to close the door on Walker Kessler. I just am not interested in sending out 1st-round picks in any trade that we make. But if they're willing to take some contracts of some guys that we would be happy to move on from, Gabe Vincent, D'Angelo Russell, then obviously that would be something the Lakers would have to do. I think Walker Kessler's worth more than those 2 contracts. I do. But I'm still reluctant to move a 1st-round pick unless I'm bringing back something else with that. So, to me, moving on from Jalen Hood-Schifino, I said this yesterday in my video, and I'll say it again. If the Lakers choose to move on from Jalen Hood-Schifino at the end of the season, or if they trade him, that's one thing. But as far as the door being closed on him coming back to the Lakers, I don't actually think it's closed. I don't actually think that we are 100% not going to see him next year as a Laker. Not 100% sure of that. It's likely, but if his market is as bad as it looks, he may not be able to get a contract in this league better than a 2-way. Now, he could sign a 2-way with another team, which is likely what he would probably end up signing, or something under $4 million, which is what the ultimate maximum would be for the team that will acquire him in trade if we trade him before that time. But I just don't think he has a role in this league right now. He's going to have to prove himself through the G League, and I do think the 2-way contract is probably what most people would want to put him on at this point, unless he's able to prove himself to be better than that. He's going to have to fight his way through the G League right now. He's a G League prospect at this point, so I don't know that it's not possible that he comes back to the Lakers next year. I don't know that we're giving up on the prospect necessarily just because we're doing this. Now, he has the freedom to move on from our organization, and he may opt to do that. You know what I mean? We're leaving it up to him to if he wants to get the hell away from this place, he can. And if I'm him, I may want to. So under those circumstances, is it likely he doesn't come back? Yes, very much so. But if he opts to be with the Lakers next year, or he can't find anywhere else to play for whatever reason, he's gonna be on the table for the Lakers as a free agent. He's gonna be on the table. So I think the Lakers are gonna, we've seen this many times. They're gonna bury him. They're not gonna play him this year so that he could play up his value to, you know what I mean? They're not gonna play him, so you're not gonna see him very much. He's gonna be in the G League, and they may manipulate his minutes in the G League so he can't play that well too. I'd hate to put that in the air, but that's kind of how the evidence. That's what the evidence has shown me. They do that type of stuff around the league. We've done it to players. Well, if we don't really want to pay a guy a certain amount, we ain't gonna play him. If we don't, you know what I mean? If we don't want him to look good, we can control that. So, it's unfortunate that those type of games are played with players, but they are played that way. So, I'd imagine we ain't gonna see much of Jalen Hood-Schifino. But that doesn't mean that he won't be with our organization. It doesn't necessarily mean that this ends his future with the Lakers as a project player. He may still be a project for us. He's just going to have to take on a contract that's more team friendly going forward. In order to do that. So that's kind of how I see that playing out, man. That's a hunch that I have. I just don't actually, because they drafted him 17th overall, and not too many people want to leave the Lakers. When you start talking about where else you're going to go, yeah, some people do choose other places, but this is LA, man. Like, the sunshine is nice. You got the, it's a lot to like about being here. So unless you just don't want to be here, if the door is still open for you to be here, 3 out of 5 players probably going to choose to be here. So I've seen things like that not go that way, obviously, many times. But I don't know. I don't know what Jalen thinks. I'm sure he has a bad taste in his mouth about this place. I'm sure this place gives him jitters. But maybe he's the type of guy who has an ego to say, man, I ain't show my best in this uniform. I'm going to show my best in this uniform. It depends on the person. And quite honestly, we don't know him that well. So who knows? But I think the door is still open for him to be a Laker after this. I think the door is still open for him to continue being a player that we develop. I think that. I don't think this signals that he's 100% gone unless he just wants to be. So that's what I think. Could be wrong. So there that is. And look, when we talk about the need to move on from this player, it's because we don't have flexibility. If moving on from this player, quote unquote, moving on is in declining his option, allows for us to flexibility to no longer have that be a need as much, which I'd imagine the Lakers are going to shake some things up so they don't have as many roster spot issues next year, then it may not be imperative for the Lakers to move on from a player that they drafted high and ultimately intended to develop at 21 years of age. So I would tell Rob Pelinka, if we didn't have such ridiculous circumstances, there is no way I would co-sign this. Moving on from this player. I wouldn't. Because he's too young. Not because of some ego stuff. We already know that was the pick we shouldn't have taken. But what we do from here is an entirely different set of options that can either be a good decision or a bad one. It doesn't relate to whether or not we made a mistake in drafting him. Of course we made a mistake in drafting him. But that doesn't mean that we can't develop him. That doesn't mean that moving on from him is a good decision this early in his career. Doesn't mean that. It may be a necessary one for our short term to decline his contract. But to kick him all the way out the door and send him into the wild, I don't know that that's necessarily the path I would choose in this situation. I would more so want the kid to come back on a contract I like and continue his development. That's what I think is the smartest way to play this, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. We don't have to let him go. We just have to maneuver his contract this way right now. And that's exactly what I tell him. That's exactly what I tell him. Like, we're not out on you. We just know it's going to take you longer than the timeline, and we need to do some things for this timeline. So this is one of the things that we got to do mathematically for the timeline. But as long as you still want to be a Laker, we still want you here. That's what I would tell Jalen. We still want you here. We know you're a 4-year project, 5-year project, bro. You know what I'm saying? Nobody necessarily wants to give up on 5-year projects this early. And I would be very shocked if he doesn't find his way in this league at some point. It may not be anytime soon, but at the very least, he's going to be like a DJ Augustine or something. So, I think that doing this is the right decision. But what we do from here in regards to letting him go out into the wild, that's a whole nother set of decisions that either be good or bad. And so I'm not lost on that. I still kind of want Jalen Hood-Schifino to hang around. And you look at some of the stuff that's going on in this league. Memphis is taking all of our guys, man. They got Castleton. That's another bit of news I can share with you guys. Castleton went to the Memphis Grizzlies on a 2-way. We didn't want to do that. We needed to let him go. He wasn't somebody we wanted to give up on. The last thing we wanted to do is let him go to the same place that Scottie Pippen is developing fantastically and being a great player for them right now. Scottie Pippen is playing some of the best basketball of any guard off of a bench in the league right now. Moving on from Scottie wasn't smart. I knew that when we did it. I told y'all that when we did it. I'm like, nah, that ain't the prospect to move on from. He's shown me too much already for me to think that I'm just moving on from him. I thought there may be some political reasons. Scottie Pippen's son, Bron James' son, energy there, something, who knows. I thought the Lakers were moving on from Scottie for the wrong reasons. He said something along the lines of he thought that Darvin Ham didn't believe in him. He didn't mention Darvin by name, but he said one of the coaches over there, and we know who the coach in Milwaukee was the game he had finished blowing that man out. He essentially said, "Yo, one of the coaches didn't believe in me." I was never of the mindset that I was going to lean into the opinion of Darvin Ham as it pertains to moving on from players like Scottie Pippen. That should not have been the decision. If it was because the coach didn't believe in him, that was absolutely the wrong decision. Now, if it had something to do with them not wanting Bronny and Scottie's sons on the same team, that's a whole nother story. If it was because y'all needed to do something, you just didn't believe in him as a team, and the scouts that we trust very much decided they didn't believe in Scottie, which I seriously doubt, based on how good our scouts are, then that would be something I co-sign. But I don't actually think we saw anything from Scottie that would make it so that we didn't believe in him, to be honest with you. I don't think so. Everything I saw from Scottie showed me that he had two-way ability, and it was a hell of a piece. He proved that several times to my eyesight. So I wasn't a fan of that move. I didn't expect for him to be as good as he is right now. I'd be lying if I said I saw this soon. But look at the pedigree, man. Sometimes you just gotta look at the pedigree. His dad was a guy that wasn't that touted of a prospect, and he went on to be a Hall of Famer. Sometimes it ain't that deep, man. Sometimes you just got to trust the genetics. So I'm a fan of Scottie Pippen Jr. I'm glad he's found his way in this league. I think he's going to play himself into a really good role. Even if it's not with Memphis, he's going to be a guy from here on out. And that's an asset we could really use right now, Laker Nation. That's an asset we could use. That's somebody that would look great on our books right now that we let walk. And probably for reasons that didn't amount to much, if I'm being completely honest with you. Probably not. So as we're moving on from Jalen Hood-Schifino, that should definitely be on our mind, watching Scottie go crazy. So, I don't think this is the greatest place for guys who are extreme projects to develop. But I also don't want to be so dense as to think that we're going to be on this Brian timeline for much longer. We're not. So moving on from all of your projects isn't the way. Creating roster spots so that you don't have to move on from your projects is actually the way. I don't think moving on from prospects that aren't ready is what's best for us long term when Bron is going to already move on within the next couple of years, at the very most. So I don't. In a nutshell, I want good projects to work with. If I deem a project not worth it, totally different story. But that we have players on our team that we're working on in the development stages to supersede LeBron James' timeline, I think that's very important. And I don't want to move on from that just because our team is shallow in the random 2025. So these are things that need to be, balanced out. Zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. We need to have a clear head about everything we're doing because we've already made a lot of bad decisions with our rosters. And I don't doubt that we're probably still doing that when you let people like Castleton walk away and Scottie walk away and maybe even Jalen walk away. You know what I mean? And who else do you ever, I don't know, even though I'm not a big believer at all in the shooter that we allowed to go to Golden State, doesn't mean that he ain't going to turn into something. I could be dead ass wrong about him too. Another one we let walk. So the Lakers got to do good decisions with their assets. They are trying to live with mistakes that have already been made, but doubling down on more mistakes, I don't think is the best way to clear up your problems. Mortgaging your future, I don't think is a good idea. Just like giving away picks is not a good idea. Giving up on prospects and closing the door on 21-year-olds, not a good idea. But for the time being, if you have to maneuver some things contractually that put that at risk, that's probably worth it. So long as there's a path to possibly bringing that player back, it's probably a worthy risk. Salute to Kobe Bennett. So it's almost game time, man. It's game time in about 5 minutes from now. So I'm going to get to watching that, man. I'm setting my food up here, get my little workout. And I'm hopeful the Lakers win the game tonight. But bigger picture is, and I'll leave us with this little last bit of conversation, that the team wins 3 games in a row is to be appreciated and expected. That the team lose 3 games in a row is something we should also expect. And the reason why is because you have 2 extremes going on at the same time. You have an extremely talented starting unit, and you have an extremely shallow and untalented bench unit. So when both of those entities have to play the same games every night, you're going to probably teeter with whichever one moves the needle that night. That's the reality of it. So for those who are saying, well, the Lakers aren't doing too bad because they're 3-2. No, they're doing very bad, because the same problem is there whether they're winning or losing. You either need your starters to drag everything, or you're letting your bench drag it to hell every night. And that's what you're going to come to find out. This is going to be an every night thing. Either the bench is going to play extremely well, the starter's going to play extremely well and lead us to victories, or the bench is going to play extremely poorly while the starters are struggling, and we're going to suck every night. So this is going to balance itself out depending on which side wins the war. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it. So for me, it's like, this is a team I expect to go on 5-game winning streaks if the starters are having a hell of a month. And this is a team I expect to go on 6-game losing streaks if the bench is bad every night and the starters aren't playing well, or the starters get hurt. As I said, we can roll one Anthony Davis ankle away from not being any good at all. And we're also one Anthony Davis MVP year away from being a contender. So your record is not necessarily the story here. The story is the essence of your team being 2 extremes at the same damn time and trying to figure out which one of those wars is going to win. And the likelihood that your bench wins the war being bad is high, because the expectation of the players that you have that are good being healthy isn't good. BDL 44, I thank you all for watching. Out.